Okay, friends, welcome back. We are going to be continuing Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. Today we're going to be reading Chapter 6. I become Supreme Lord of the Bathroom. Okay, friends, stop it now to get your giggles out. Now let's get started. Once I got over the fact that my Latin teacher was a horse, we had a pretty nice tour, though I was careful not to walk behind him. I had done Pooper Scooper Patrol in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade a few times, and I'm sorry, but I did not trust Chiron's back the way that I trusted his front. We passed the volleyball pit. Several of the campers nudged each other. One of them pointed to the miniature horn I was carrying. Another said, "That's him!" Most of the campers were older than me. Their satyr friends were bigger than Grover, all of them trotting around in orange Camp Half-Blood t-shirts, with nothing else to cover their bare, shaggy hindquarters. I wasn't normally shy, but the way they stared at me made me uncomfortable. I felt like they were expecting me to do a flip or something. I looked back at the farmhouse. It was a lot bigger than I realized. 4 stories tall, sky blue, with a white trim, like an upscale seaside resort. I was checking out the Brass Eagle weather vane weather vane on top when something caught my eye. A shadow in the upmost window of the attic's gable. Something had moved the curtain, just for a second, but I got the distinct impression I was being watched. "What's up there?" I asked Chiron. He looked where I pointed, and his smile faded. "Just the attic." "Someone lives there?" "No," he said with finality. "Not a single living thing." I got the feeling he was being truthful, but I was also sure something had just moved that curtain. "Come along, Percy," Chiron said, his light-hearted tone now a little forced. "Lots to see." We walked through the strawberry fields, where campers were picking bushels of berries, while satyrs played a tune on their reed pipes. Chiron told me that the camp grew a nice crop for export to New York restaurants and Mount Olympus. "It pays our expenses," he explained, "and the strawberries take almost no effort." He said Mr. D had that effect on fruit-bearing plants. They just went crazy around him. It works best with wine grapes, but Mr. D was restricted from growing wine grapes, so they grew strawberries instead. I watched the satyrs playing his pipes. His music was causing lines of bugs to leave the strawberry patch in every direction, like refugees fleeing a fire. I wondered if Grover could work that kind of magic with music. I wondered if he was still inside the farmhouse, getting chewed out by Mr. D. "Grover won't get in too much trouble, will he?" I asked. Chiron, he was a good protector." Chiron sighed. He shed his tweed jacket and draped it over his horse back like a saddle. "Grover has big dreams, Percy. Perhaps bigger than are reasonable. To reach his goals, he must first demonstrate great courage by succeeding as a keeper, finding a new camper and bringing them back to Camp Half-Blood." "But he did that." "I might agree with you," Chiron said, "but it is not my place to judge. Dionysus and the Council of Cloven Elders must decide. I'm afraid they might not see this assignment as a success. After all, Grover lost you in New York. Then there's the unfortunate, fate of your mother. And the fact that Grover was unconscious when you dragged him over the property line. The council might question whether that shows any courage on Grover's part." I wanted to protest. None of that was Grover's fault. I also felt really, really guilty. If I hadn't given Grover the slip at the bus station, he might not have gotten in trouble. "He'll get a second chance, won't he?" Chiron winced. I'm afraid that was Grover's second chance, Percy. The council was not anxious to give him another one either, after what happened the first time 5 years ago. Olympus knows I advised him to wait longer before trying again. He's still so small for his age. How old is he? Oh, 28. Remember, guys, that means he's like 14 years old. What? And he's in 6th grade? Satyrs mature half as fast as humans, Percy. Grover has been the equivalent of a middle school student for the past 6 years. Ooh. That's horrible. Quite, Chiron agreed. At any rate, Grover is a late bloomer, even by satyr standards, and not yet very accomplished with woodland magic either. Alas, he was anxious to pursue his dreams. Perhaps now he'll find some other career. That's not fair. What happened the first time? I asked. Was it really bad? Chiron looked away quickly. Let's move along, shall we? But I wasn't quite ready to let the subject drop. Something had occurred to me when Chiron talked about my mother's fate, as if he was intentionally avoiding the word death. The beginning of an idea, a tiny, hopeful fire, started in my mind. Chiron, I said, if the gods and Olympus and all that are real, yes, child, does that mean that the underworld is real too? Chiron's expression darkened. Yes, child. He paused, as if choosing his words carefully. There's a place where spirits go after death. But for now, until we know more, I urge you to put that out of your mind. What do you mean, until we know more? Come, Percy, let's see the woods. So remember, friends, I'm going to go back and forth a little bit in these pictures because they don't follow the book exactly, right? I'm going to actually go back to, because I think this gives us the best. So there's the volleyball pit. Now they're going to look at the woods over here. As I got closer, I realized how huge the forest was. It took up at least a quarter of the valley. That means 1/4. With trees so tall and thick, you could imagine nobody had been there since the Native Americans. Chiron said, the woods are stocked if you care to try your luck, but go armed. Stocked with what? I asked. Armed with what? You'll see. Capture the flag is Friday. Do you have your own sword and shield? My own? No, Chiron said. I suppose you don't. I don't suppose you do. I think a size 5 will do. I'll visit the armory later. I wanted to ask what kind of summer camp had an armory, but there was too much else to think about. So the tour continued. We saw the archery range. The canoeing lake, the stables, which Chiron didn't seem to like very much. Stables are where you put horses. Do you think that a half horse, half man would like a stable? Not me. The javelin range, the sing-along amphitheater, the arena where Chiron said they held sword fights and spear fights. Sword and spear fights, I asked? Cabin challenges and all that. Not lethal, usually. Oh, yes, and there's the mess hall. So this is the mess hall right here. Chiron pointed to an outdoor pavilion framed in white Grecian columns. There, on the hilltop overlooking, that's not it, on the hilltop overlooking the sea. I thought that was it, but that can't be it. There was a dozen stone picnic tables, so this can't be it because listen, but no roof and no walls. So this is how I know it's not that, because look, this has a roof right here, right? So the dining pavilion had no roof and no walls. It just had columns and tables on the inside. What do you do if it rains? I asked. Chiron looked at me as if I'd gone a little weird. We still have to eat, don't we? I decided to drop the subject. Finally, he showed me the cabins. These are the cabins, friends. There were 12 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So here are the 12 cabins. Nestled in the woods by the lake, they are arranged in a U, with 2 at the base and 5 in each row. They were without a doubt the most bizarre collection of cabins I'd ever seen. So let's keep going because it's going to show them to us in a second. Here, I'm going to actually skip ahead. Yep, so okay. Let me check. Okay. So I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit, just as I describe these. So this one is one that I'm going to describe in a second. Let me read the paragraph and then I'll go back, okay? Except for the fact that each had a large brass number above the door, odds on the left side, evens on the right, smokestacks like a tiny, they looked absolutely nothing like each other. 9 had smokestacks like a tiny factory. 4 had tomato vines on the walls and a roof made out of real grass. 7 seemed to be made of solid gold, which gleamed so much in the sunlight it was almost impossible to look at it. They all faced the commons area about the size of a soccer field, dotted with Greek statues, fountains, flower beds, and a couple of basketball hoops, which were more my speed. The center of the field was a huge stone-lined fire pit. Even though it was a warm afternoon, the hearth smoldered. A girl, about 9 years old, was tending the flames, poking the coal with a stick. The pair of cabins at the head of the field, numbers 1 and 2, looked like his and hers mausoleums. That's like where you put, it's like, you know those whole buildings for graves? That's called a mausoleum. Big white marble boxes with heavy columns in front. Cabin 1 was the biggest, bulkiest of the 12. Its polished bronze doors shimmered like a hologram, so that from different angles, lightning bolts seemed to be streaking across. Lightning bolts streak across them. Cabin 2 was more graceful somehow, with slimmer columns, garlands, and pomegranates and flowers. The walls were carved with images of peacocks. Okay, friends, who was the god of lightning? Okay, and who was his wife? Zeus and Hera, I guess? Correct, Karen said. Their cabins looked empty. Several of the cabins are. That's true. No one ever stays in 1 or 2. Okay, so each cabin had like a different god, like a mascot. 12 cabins for the 12 Olympians. But why would some be empty? I stopped in front of the first cabin. Cabin 3. Okay, this is cabin 3. You can't see it very well. So this is going to be one of the best shots we're going to get of it. So I just want you to kind of see it as I describe it. It wasn't high and mighty like cabin 1, but long and low and solid. The outer walls were rough gray stone, studded with pieces of seashells and coral, as if the slabs had been hewn straight from the bottom of the ocean. I peeked inside the doorway, and Kyron said, "Oh, I wouldn't do that." Do you guys know which god that is? Before he could pull me back, I caught the salty scent of the interior. Like the wind on the shore of Montauk, the interior walls glowed like abalone. That's a fish. There were 6 empty bunk beds with silk sheets turned down. There was no sign of anyone had ever slept there. The place felt so sad and lonely. I was glad when Kyron put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Come along, Percy." Most of the other cabins were crowded with campers. Number 5, that was the other one I wanted to show y'all. So that's number 3 still. Here's number 5. Number 5 was bright red, a real nasty paint job, as if the color had been splashed on with buckets and fists. The roof was lined with barbed wire. A stuffed boar's head hung over the doorway, and its eyes seemed to follow me. Inside, I could see a bunch of mean-looking kids, both girls and boys, arm wrestling and arguing at each other while rock music blared. The loudest was a girl, maybe 13 or 14. She wore a 3XL Camp Half-Blood shirt under a camouflage jacket. She zeroed in on me and gave me an evil sneer. She reminded me of Nancy Bobofit, though the camper girl was much bigger and tougher looking. And her hair was long and stringy, and instead of brown, and brown instead of red. Okay, we're gonna go back here. Okay. I kept walking, trying to stay clear of Chiron's hooves. We haven't seen any other centaurs, I observed. No, said Chiron. My kinsmen are wild and barbaric folk. I'm afraid you might encounter them in the wilderness or at major sporting events, but you won't see any here. You said your name was Chiron. Are you really? He smiled down at me. The Chiron from the stories, trainer of Hercules and all that? Yes, Percy, I am. But shouldn't you be dead? Chiron paused, as if the question intrigued him. I honestly don't know about should be. The truth is, I can't be dead. You see, eons ago, the gods granted me my wish. I could continue to the work I loved. I could be a teacher of heroes as long as humanity needed me. I gained much from that wish, and I gave up much. But I'm still here, so I can only assume I am still needed. I thought about being a teacher for 3,000 years. It wouldn't have made my top 10 things to wish for list. But it doesn't ever get boring? No, he said. Horribly depressing at times, but never boring. Why depressing? Chiron seemed to turn hard of hearing again. He pretended like he couldn't hear him again. Oh, look, he said. Annabeth is waiting for us. Okay. The blonde girl I'd met at the big house was reading a book in front of the last cabin on the left, number 11. When we reached her, she looked me over critically, like she was still thinking about how much I drooled. I tried to see what she was reading, but I couldn't make out the title. I thought my dyslexia was acting up. Then I realized the title wasn't even in English. The letters looked Greek to me. I mean, literally Greek. They were pictures of temples and statues in different kinds of columns, like those in an architecture book. Annabeth, Chiron said, I have master's archery class at noon. Would you take Percy from here? Yes, sir. Cabin 11, Chiron told me, gesturing towards the doorway. Make yourself at home. Out of all of the cabins, Out of all of the cabins, 11 looked the most like a regular old summer camp cabin. Emphasis on the old. The threshold was worn down, the brown paint peeling. Over the doorway was one of those doctor symbols, a winged pole with 2 snakes wrapped around it. What do they call it? A caduceus. Inside, it was packed with people, both boys and girls, way more than the number of bunk beds. Sleeping bags were spread out on the floor. It looked like the gym where the Red Cross had set up an evacuation center. Chiron didn't go in. The door was too low for him. But when the campers saw him, they stood and bowed respectfully. Well then, Chiron said, good luck, Percy. I'll see you at dinner. He galloped away toward the archery range. I stood in the doorway looking at the kids. They weren't bowing anymore. They were staring at me, sizing me up. I knew this routine well. I'd gone through it at enough schools. Well, Annabeth prompted. Go on. So naturally, I tripped coming in the door and made a complete fool of myself. There were snickers from the campers, but none of them said anything. Annabeth announced, Percy Jackson, meet cabin 11. Regular or undetermined? Somebody asked. I didn't know what to say, but Annabeth said, undetermined. Everybody groaned. Ugh. A guy who was a little older than the rest came forward. Now, campers, that's what we're here for. Welcome, Percy. You can have that spot on the floor right over there. The guy was about 19. He looked pretty cool. He was tall and muscular with short cropped sandy hair, friendly smile. Okay, I am going to warn you guys. They don't... Actually, you know what? Okay, I'm going to skip ahead in the graphic novel because they do show this part. Okay. So this is because I want you guys to. Okay? I want y'all to be able to see this. So, the guy was about 19. He looked pretty cool. He was tall and muscular with short cropped sandy hair and a friendly smile. He wore an orange tank top and cut-off sandals and a leathery necklace with about 5 different colored clay beads. The only thing unsettling about his appearance was a thick white scar that ran from just beneath his right eye to his jaw, like a knife slash. This is Luke, Annabeth said, her voice sounding different. I glanced over and could have sworn she was blushing. She saw me looking and her expression turned hard. He's your counselor for now. For now? I asked. You're undetermined, Luke explained. They don't know what cabin to put you in. So you're here. Cabin 11 takes all newcomers, all visitors. Naturally, we would. Hermes, our patron, is the god of travelers. You guys remember Hermes, the messenger god? He's one of y'all's favorites, yeah? I looked at the tiny section of the floor they had given me. I had nothing to put there to mark it as my own. No luggage, no clothes, no sleeping bag, just the Minotaur horn. I thought about setting that down, but then I remembered that Hermes was also the god of thieves. I looked around the cabin at the camper faces. Some sullen and suspicious, some grinning stupidly, some eyeing me as if they were waiting for a chance to pick my pockets. How long will I be here? That's a good question, Luke said, until you're determined. How long will that take? The campers laughed. Come on, Annabeth told me. I'll show you the volleyball court. I've already seen it. Come on. She grabbed my wrist and dragged me outside. Okay. When we were a few feet away, Annabeth said, Jackson, you have to do better than that. What? She rolled her eyes and mumbled under her breath. I can't believe I thought you were the one. What's your problem? I was getting angry now. All I know is I killed some bull guy. Don't talk about that, Annabeth told me. You know how many kids at this camp wish they had your chance to get killed? To fight a Minotaur? What do you think we train for? I shook my head. Look, if the thing I fought was really the Minotaur, the same one in the stories, yes. Then there's only one. Yes. And he died like a gajillion years ago. Theseus killed him in the labyrinth. So, monsters don't die, Percy. They can be killed, but they don't die. Oh, thanks. That clears it up. They don't have souls like you and me. You can dispel them for a while, maybe even for a whole lifetime if you're lucky. But they are primal forces. Chiron calls them archetypes. Eventually, they're going to reform. I thought about Mrs. Dodds. You mean if I killed one accidentally with I mean your math teacher? That's right. She's still out there. You just made her very, very mad. How did you know about Mrs. Dodds? You talk in your sleep. You almost called her something. A fury? Those are Hades' torturers, right? Annabeth glanced nervously at the ground, as if she expected me to open up and swallow her. You shouldn't call them by name, even here. We call them the kindly ones, if we want to speak to them at all, or of them at all. Look, is there anything we can say without it thundering? I sounded whiny even to myself, but right then I didn't care. Why do I have to stay in cabin 11 anyway? Why is everybody so crowded together? There are plenty of empty bunks right over there. They pointed at the first few cabins, and Annabeth turned pale. You don't choose your cabin, Percy. It depends on who your parents are, or your parent. She stared at me, waiting for me to get it. My mom is Sally Jackson. She works at a candy store in Grand Central Station. At least, she used to. I'm sorry about your mom, Percy, but that's not what I meant. I was talking about your other parent, your dad. He's dead. I never knew him. Annabeth sighed. Clearly, she had had this conversation before with other kids. Your father's not dead, Percy. How can you say that? You know him? No, of course not. Then how can you? Because I know you. And you wouldn't be here if you weren't one of us. You don't know anything about me. No, she raised her eyebrow. I bet you moved around from... Sorry, I'm trying to make sure that I'm with you. Okay. I'm sure you moved around from school to school. I bet you were kicked out of a lot of them. Diagnosed with dyslexia? Probably ADHD too. I tried to swallow my embarrassment. What does that have to do with anything? Taken together, it's almost a sure sign. Letters floating off the page when you read, right? That's because your mind is hardwired for ancient Greek. And the ADHD, you're impulsive. Can't sit still in the classroom. That's your battlefield reflexes. In a real fight, they'll keep you alive. As for the attention problems, that's because you see too much, Percy. Not too little. Your senses are better than a regular mortal's. Of course, the teachers wanted you medicated. Most of them were monsters. They don't want you seeing them for what they are. You sound like you went through something like that. Most of the kids here did. If you weren't like us, you wouldn't have survived the Minotaur, much less the ambrosia and nectar. Ambrosia and nectar? The food and drink that we were giving you that made you better. That stuff would have killed a normal kid. It would have turned your blood to fire and your bones to sand, and you'd be dead. Face it, you're a half-blood. A half-blood? I was reeling. So many questions, I didn't know where to start. Then a husky voice yelled, Well, a newbie. I looked over. The big girl from the ugly red cabin was sauntering towards us. She had 3 older girls behind her, all big and ugly and mean looking like her, all wearing camo jackets. Clarice, Annabeth said, why don't you go polish your spear or something? Sure thing, Miss Princess, said the big girl, so I can run you through it on Friday. Eres escoras, Annabeth said, which I somehow understood was Greek for, go to the crows, though I had a feeling it was much worse curse than it sounded. You don't stand a chance. We'll pulverize you, Clarice said, but her eyes twitched. Perhaps she wasn't sure she could follow through with her threat. She turned toward me. Who's this little runt? Percy Jackson, Annabeth said. Meet Clarice, daughter of Ares. I blinked. Like the war god? Clarice sneered. You got a problem with that? No, I said, recovering my wits. It explains the bad smell. Clarice growled. We got an initiation ceremony for you, newbie. Prissy. It's Percy. Whatever. Come on, I'll show you. Clarice, Annabeth tried to say. Stay out of it, wise girl. Annabeth looked pained, but she did stay out of it. And I didn't really want her help. I was the new kid. I had to earn my own rep. I handed Annabeth my Minotaur horn and got ready for the fight. But before I knew it, Clarice had me by the neck and was dragging me toward a cinder block building I knew immediately was the bathroom. I was kicking and punching. I'd been in plenty of fights before. But this girl, Clarice, had hands like iron. She dragged me into the girls' bathroom. There was a line of toilets on one side and a line of shower stalls down the other. It smelled like any public bathroom. And I was thinking as much as I could think. Sorry. Smelled just like any other, and I was thinking as much as I could think with Clarice ripping my hair out, that if this place belonged to the gods, they could have afforded classier Johns. They could have afforded nicer bathrooms. He's critiquing their bathrooms, y'all. Clarice's friends were all laughing, and I was trying to find the strength I used to fight the Minotaur, but it just wasn't there. Like he's big 3 material, Clarice said as she pushed me towards one of the toilets. Yeah, right. Minotaur probably fell over laughing. He was so stupid looking. Her friends snickered. Annabeth stood in the corner, watching through her fingers. Clarice bent me over on my knees and started pushing my head down towards the toilet. It reeked like rusted pipes, and well, like what goes in toilets. I strained to keep my head up. I was looking at the scummy water, thinking I will not go into that. I won't. Then something happened. I felt a tug in the pit of my stomach. I heard the pipes rumbling. The pipes shuddered. Clarice's grip on my hair loosened. Water shot out of the toilet, making an arc straight over my head. And the next thing I knew, I was sprawled on the bathroom tile with Clarice screaming at me. I turned just as the water blasted out of the toilet, hitting Clarice straight in the face so hard it pushed her down on her butt. The water stayed on her like the spray was from a fire hose, pushing her backward to the shower stall. She struggled, gasping, and her friends started coming toward her. But the other toilets exploded too. 6 more streams of toilet water blasted them back. The showers attacked too, and together all the fixtures sprayed the camouflage girls right up out of the bathroom, spinning them around like pieces of garbage being washed away. As soon as they were out of the door, I felt the tug in my gut lessen, and the water shut off as quickly as it had started. The entire bathroom was flooded. Annabeth hadn't been spared. She was dripping wet, but she hadn't been pushed out the door. She was standing in exactly the same place, staring at me, in shock. I looked down, and I realized I was sitting in the only dry spot in the whole room. There was a circle of dry floor around me. I didn't have 1 drop of water on me. Nothing. I stood up, my legs shaky. Annabeth said, "How did you... I don't know." We walked out the door. Outside, Clarice and her friends were sprawled in the mud, and a bunch of other campers were gathered around gawking. Clarice's hair was flattened around her face. Her camouflage jacket was sopping, and she smelled like sewage. She gave me a look of absolute hatred. "You're dead, new boy. You are totally dead." I probably should have let it go, but I said, "You want to gargle more toilet water again, Clarice? Close your mouth." Her friends had to hold her back. They dragged her towards cabin 5, while the other campers made way to avoid her flailing feet, Annabeth stared at me. I couldn't tell whether she was just grossed out or angry at me for dousing her, for covering her in water. What? I demanded. What are you thinking? I'm thinking, she said, that I want you on my team for Capture the Flag. Okay, friends, I'm going to show you guys the pictures of them in cabin 11 for a second, just because remember the book did it out of order. Actually, no, remember they do stuff out of order. So we are going to start back up with it down here. Okay, so that is where we will start again. And that is the end of chapter 5, or chapter 6. Look forward to chapter 7, My Dinner Goes Up in Smoke.